welcome, citizens. I'm your host for the time being, Mr. E, and today we're going to look at some medical fleets or some medical fleet concepts. Some ships that we'll look at today are concepts and others are flyable. None of the ships you're going to see are recommendations for purchasing or necessarily how I would put together my own fleet. The idea here is to theory craft a bit and explore the possibilities. Any stats stated could be incorrect or could change with time. Before I start, I should acknowledge that medical gameplay can be done with a med pen or a med gun right now. You don't necessarily need a medical bed. Without a medical bed, though, you will be unable to heal Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 injuries. Tier 3 injuries are the lowest tier of injury outside of getting injured and not needing medical attention, outside of just your med pen or whatever. But once you sustain a Tier 3 injury, you have permanent damage that needs, I'd say, a hospital or a medical bed to cure. Your med pens aren't going to, fix you permanently. They'll keep you going for a time being, but they're not going to fix you completely. That's not always important. A lot of players right now, in my experience, especially, I've had guys with Tier 3 leg injuries and try to invite them back to the Cuddy Red. They don't want to. They want to just keep looting their bunkers and do whatever they were doing before they were down. So that being said, you can put any combinations of ships together and make it work. All you need to start in Star Citizen is an Aurora starter ship package. And right now, they go for $45. I suggest the Aurora over the Mustang. If you're going to lean towards combat, go with the Alpha. If you want to play a more general gameplay, or again, even medical, and you don't want to, buy a Pisces or a Drake Cuddy Red, or any of the larger ships, you can do it with an Aurora. Is the point I'm trying to get across here. It should also be noted that every ship here, up to the Carrack, can be solo piloted at the moment. Obviously, you're not going to get the most effectiveness out of the vehicle. You can't simultaneously pilot the Carrack, operate the turrets, drop a landing party off quickly. These are all things where you need extra players. But again, in the current iteration of the game, there's plenty of guys that solo a Carrack. You could even solo a Carrack with a Pisces and kind of just leave it in orbit or out in space, some random place, and just kind of shuttle, use the Pisces as a shuttle, go out and heal people. That could be done right now. It doesn't really matter. I've outlined a few things here that I think are important for medical gameplay. And again, we're just trying to specialize. So for me, a medical fleet, aside from a medic, there are 3 forms of security I think that are important, especially as you build out your fleet. First off, it's going to be ground security. Security to go into any place or ship with your medic. Keep the area and your medic safe. The next would be ship security, someone or something capable of protecting the vehicles, whether that's them lifting back off and kind of flying around, or if you have a stationary turret, or again, personnel on the ground. The other form of security that I think is important is air security. We can have all the turrets we want, but if a plane or a ship can just buzz over us, left, right, drop bombs, then we don't have very good air security. And again, we need to do all of this in as small as package as possible. We're not building a combat fleet here. If I was, I might pick ships differently. Other things that I think that are important to build into a medical fleet would be transportation, one for either your client, if they need, a ride back to civilization, or transportation for your own troops and personnel that you need. Maybe hauling extra vehicles. But I don't think we'll get into some of that with some of the hangars here with the bigger ships. Something I haven't considered in building this fleet is an engineer. In the future, especially with all the engineer talk they're talking about this last week, I would definitely consider maybe having an engineer or some type of industrial role here. But these are the 4 ships in game right now that have medical beds and that you theoretically could do the full game loop out of. First up, we got the Pisces. Then we have the Cuddy Red. Next up is the Anvil Carrack. And after that, we have the 890 Jump. The 2 big craft here, the 890 and the Carrack, both have Tier 2 medical beds, which currently allow you to respawn. And I'm not sure how permanent that is. And the 2 small ships, the Cuddy Red and the Pisces CXR, both have Tier 3 beds in them. The Cuddy has 2 Tier 3 beds, and the Pisces has 1 Tier 3 bed. Some other honorable mentions for ships that are currently in concept or rumored to have medical abilities based on modularity in the future. We already covered the Pisces and we already covered the Cuddy Red. So next up here are Robert Space Industries Apollo Medevac and Robert Space Industries Apollo Triage. After that, we have Origin 600i, Galaxy, Drake Caterpillar, the Anvil Carrack, the Misk Odyssey, the Polaris, the Endeavor, the 890 Jump, the Banu Merchantman, the Idris P, the Kraken, and the Javelin. And if you see how big that Javelin gets compared to that Pisces, these are all ships that players will have the opportunity to own or fly in game. And I believe each one of these ships is going to have medical capabilities at some point in time. There are no drivables here, or hoverables, or whatever you want to call them, because I'm not sure about them. I'm not very sure about these. If you see any discrepancies here, please correct me in the comments below. Your first option, if you want to do medical gameplay, is an Aurora. You strap a med gun or some med pens to your leg, and you can run around and do medical gameplay in an Aurora. Right now, it might be the best idea with all the piracy going on to do medical gameplay in some type of bigger ship, something with a lot of shields, or maybe like a light fighter where you're capable of fighting back. This Pisces, though, is not a bad option. It's nimble, it's got 2 guns, but the main purpose here is it gives you the ability to heal Tier 3 injuries with its Tier 3 medical bed. We have the ability to deliver medical services, and if need be, if we want to up our crew size, we can bring someone to protect us. I don't recommend bringing more than that in case if you need to haul your patient back to safety. For the next step up here, we have the Pisces and then an Aegis Gladius. Some of these ships are debatable. Some people would say the Anvil Arrow is the best. Others will say the Gladius is the best. I'm sure someone else has a completely different opinion. None of that really matters. The idea here is expanding out the security that we have. Now, at this capacity, if you're not in a very dangerous spot, both of these craft can land. And say you have 3 occupants running this crew, you could have 2 to 3 crew members here, each pilot for each craft, and then 1 drop member in the drop seat. Or, again, your medic in the drop seat, and then both of these craft can land, drop the medic off, and take off. Or they both can land and everyone can dismount and proceed with the medical mission. I don't think it's a bad option, but either way, with this combination, the Aegis Gladius gives you ground security and air security. It can sit and hover above your Pisces as you need it to, or it can fly around and engage a fighter. All right, we're going to step up here. Well, maybe not step up, but step over to another idea. The Pisces CXR has a crew size of 2, and again, you can fit 3 people in it, 1 in the medical bed. The Pisces CX8 has a crew size of 3. It has a pilot seat and 2 drop seats with a little bit of cargo space, and again, it allows you to bring personnel on your flight. I think you have the ability to gauge a light fighter because the Pisces is nothing to squawk at, or you have the ability to land both craft and dismount an entire party, an entire squad, to move on an objective. This option allows us to have a medical role, ground security, ship security, and some form of air security. It's not as good as the Gladius, but it'll do in a pinch, right? All right, next we're stepping it up a tiny little bit. We're giving ourselves more medical capabilities with the Drake Cutlass Red here, which is going to have 2 Tier 3 medical beds in it with a crew size of 2, and arguably you can fit, I think, maybe 4 in there with life support. I'm not 100% how that works. There's no drop seats, and the Aegis Gladius is our light fighter and security. Again, a level of air support and maybe some ground support. We're looking at a little bit different combination. We're expanding out our security role here. Also, our medical capabilities. So right here, the medical ship in the middle, this one is the Triage. There's another white one called the Medevac. We'll discuss the differences here. The Triage is supposed to be, from my understanding, more nimble. And this is the first medical ship that is going to introduce respawn capabilities. It's a modular ship, and in its modularity, it's just medical modularity. So it's going to have 2 kind of bed areas, and you can choose to have 1 Tier 1 bed where you're going to be able to respawn from. And on the other side, you could have 2 Tier 2 beds where you can heal Tier 2 injuries, or you can swap out one of those 2 sides for 3 Tier 3 beds. Apparently that's the idea. This ship introduces a few different interesting characteristics. 1, we have access to a remote turret, which is going to help provide ground security. And 2, once this ship is not currently in the game, once it is implemented, apparently we'll have some medical drones. This is the only ship with medical drones, but basically it's a floating stretcher, and I'm not sure if it'll have any medical capabilities at all. I don't really think so. But here we've picked a different light fighter. This one is the Anvil Arrow, the other premier meta light fighter, at least arguably. I really do like the Anvil Arrow, and I really do like the Aegis Gladius. I don't think I'm a good enough pilot to properly utilize either one of them to their full potential, so I can't tell you which one I prefer yet. I do think they're both good ships. Behind our Arrow and our Apollo, we have an Anvil F7C Hornet. Now, I know this isn't optimal, and I could have just picked the light fighter, and I'm sure I have in a couple other images, but I picked the Anvil because it's a medium fighter. It has more firepower than the Arrow. It's not as nimble. So in my concept here, the Arrow can focus on air security, and the Anvil can split ground security with the triage. And the Apollo triage can have the ground personnel in it. It has a crew size of 1 to 2, but I assume you'll be able to fit, I don't know, maybe 4 people in there. Maybe you can bring some extra crew. And just like earlier, this ship can land, drop off a ground party, a small ground party, and then take off. Or it can land and stay there until the medical rescue is over and have the Hornet cover it. The Hornet can either park next to it and use its remote turret. It gives fighter pilot capabilities-ish, and a turret gunner. It gives 2 extra turret gunners in this possibility to protect the area around the ship. Let's move up to the RSI Apollo medevac. In fashion with the rest here, we're expanding our capabilities. So first of all, the medevac has a crew size of 2, and it has the same med bed options as the triage. You can either choose from 1 tier 1 and 2 tier 2, or swap out either one of those 2 options for 3 tier 3 beds. The Anvil Hurricane in front as a 2-man heavy fighter. It has a turret on it, and it's a lot stockier than any of the other fighting ships that have been premiered in this list so far. A lot of these ships have, in this fleet concept, are picked by me for building out some of my fleets. And some of these ships, I just have experience flying, and I think they're good. Others I'm interested in. The Anvil Hurricane is a good heavy fighter, and basically it can provide good ground protection while our 2 Aegis Gladius support and ground protection, and then double our capability in the air security department. Again, with the medevac, you have your ground crew able to deploy from there. The one thing I forgot to incorporate back with the Cuddy Red, maybe we'll cut back here, is ground vehicle ability. So with the Cuddy Red, you're able to fit a PTV or an STV into the back end of it. And that gives us the ability to park farther away and worry a little bit less about ship security. At least we're not going to be right up on the bunker and in the action. We could deploy from a farther distance. I assume that holds true for the triage along with the medevac, but until we know for sure, I don't want to say. I think you're going to be able to stick an STV or a PTV back there. So next up, we're going to backtrack a little bit. So we have upgraded ourselves to possibly 7-man crew here with 2 arrows, each light fighter seating 1 person, a 2-seater CXR, and a 3-seater CX8. We lose our ground transportation ability, but again, we can treat this as a kind of fly up, drop off the personnel necessary, and fly away and wait for them to be done. Or our 2 Pisces can land while the arrows defend the air. It's not the most optimal, but I honestly say this is like a realistic combination. Rocking 2 Pisces and then maybe 1 light fighter. You don't have to have the 2, but for the sake of this exercise, we're going to keep increasing as we go here. So if you haven't caught the pattern yet, the next one up here is the Cutlass Red. The Cutlass Red, we're expanding out with the Cutlass Black, and that is so we have more dropship capabilities to carry personnel and vehicles. Obviously, equipping them with 2 light fighters for air security, with the Hornet to support air and ground security. Something I got to keep backtracking. I have I'm about halfway through this video, at least me trying to talk, and I keep mixing up ship security with ground security. So I have 3 versions of security: ground security, ship security, and air security. I'm pretty sure we've already covered them. If we haven't, we'll reestablish it. Again, ground security is the security personnel that are going to go along with the medic and into a building or a ship and make sure the area is safe. Ship security can either be a turret, personnel or a ship on the ground that is going to actually keep our craft safe from pirates or to enemies. Air security is stuff that can effectively engage targets that are trying to hurt us in the air. So back to that. Here we have the ability to drop the 2 Cuddy Reds, and then we have the Hornet to kind of hover above them and keep them safe as the 2 arrows fly around the area, boosting our perimeter out even further. With the Cuddy Black, we have the ability to carry bigger or larger vehicles, or more of them, obviously. And 6 personnel, I think, if I remember right, are sitting in the drop seats. It has a crew size of 3, and then you can fit 6 in the back. So that's 9 people, plus the Cuddy Reds 2 for 11, and our 3 pilots for a total crew of possibly 14 people. Again, maybe more, maybe less. I'm not sure what the air support or the life support concept is on any of these, but anyways. On to our next combination. Back to the Apollo Triage, equipped with 2 arrows and an Anvil Hurricane. The new ship in this equation is the Anvil Legionnaire. And holy crap, I'm now just realizing that I might be an Anvil fanboy. Maybe the proclivity of Anvil ships in my list here is because, so to me, medical gameplay is going to be linked highly with combat, obviously. Most people that are going to go down are the people experiencing combat. And in order to save people, you're probably going to have to engage in combat. Anvil being a military ship maker, I guess that's probably why a lot of these ships are on the list. Anyways, back to the topic at hand here. We have the Anvil Legionnaire, and it's like a medium-sized drop ship with a crew size of 2 and drop seats for 8. Special ability here in this fleet is giving us the ability to hack in to another craft and possibly dock them and then enter. If this is an enemy vehicle, someone's been abducted or something, or it just gives the ability. I think we might lose an ability to have ground vehicles in this case. You could also equip it with what is it called? Instead of using the Legionnaire, you could use the Centurion if you wanted to emphasize ground vehicles and didn't want the hacking ability. But for the sake of this exercise, just what a fleet might look like if they were, flying around and they need the ability to EVA or hack into someone else's ship. This might not be a bad option. Otherwise, you could always, force entry. All right, next up, we have the Apollo Medevac. I don't know if I've covered it already, but the distinction between the Medevac and the Apollo, I believe, or the Medevac and the Triage is being more light and nimble, and it lacks missiles, and I believe the Medevac here is supposed to have missiles and heavier armor, so it's supposed to be able to deal with damage. And so here I wanted to incorporate the idea of a heavy fighter being multi-purpose. We still have our light fighters because the best thing at dogfighting probably will always be a light fighter. So to have a couple escorting you is always a good option. Here though, we've upgraded our heavy fighters, each with a crew size of 2. The ship in the back is the Vanguard Hoplite, and it has 6 drop seats and a crew size of 2, 1 pilot, 1 turret gunner. The Vanguard Sentinel, the blue one in the front, is a electronic warfare ship. From my understanding, it has EMP capabilities, and it has a crew size of 2, 1 pilot and 1 gunner. I chose the Vanguards here just for, so they're heavy fighters, but I believe in lore, they're supposed to have longer range than a typical fighter. They're meant for long missions, maybe expanding the range or how often you would have to refuel. All right, next we're gonna get into some bigger fleets. These are just some fun ideas that I put together. Nothing is concrete, but I tried to build 4 fleets based around 4 different concepts of medical gameplay. Some overlap and some don't. First up here, we're going to use the Robert Space Industries Galaxy with the medical modular attachment. This is a large industrial medical ship, and it doesn't have to have a medical capabilities, but if you choose the medical capabilities, you're supposed to be able to have 1 tier 1 bed, 2 tier 2 beds, and tier 3 tier beds all simultaneously. That gives this ship a lot of medical capability. So here I have focused a medical ship and a fleet that would be specialized in landing and controlling an area and using the Galaxy as the hospital for the patient. We have a Centurion in the back, which equipped with the Galaxy's extending hangar at the bottom there that kind of just goes straight down. You have the ability for ground vehicles. So here I've chosen an Ursa rover. Maybe someday it'll have a medical bed, who knows? And then I've got some Cyclones in the back with the Centurion. Obviously, we've incorporated 2 light fighters, 2 anvil arrows for our air security potential, and we've also upgraded our heavy fighter potential here with the Aegis Redeemer. I don't know if you've flown the Redeemer or fought a Redeemer. These things are flying tanks. They are beefy and they can dish out a lot of power. So if anyone wants to come in and attack the galaxy, the idea is here that Redeemer will be able to dish out enough power to where you can't ignore it. Also, I threw an Eclipse in because, again, this concept is to land, secure an area, and in order to do that, you might have to destroy some pretty big things. So to send the Eclipse in before you drop might be a good idea, and to use it as a scouting ship. I mean, that's basically the idea. I don't want to spend too much time, but I thought it was pretty neat. Next up, we have the Anvil Carrack Expedition, and the idea for this fleet is using the Carrack, as I mentioned in the beginning here, as a ship that you're going to leave in orbit or out in space, and you're going to have shuttlecraft that you kind of leave the ship from to go do medical gameplay and to help people. And so we have our 2 CXR Pisces, 1 shuttlecraft, and 2 Arrow, all which I believe can at least enter the hangar door on top here. Oh, we'll back up just a moment. The RSI Galaxy has a garage that extends from the bottom, but it also has a hangar in the back. You could pair this with a CXR as well. I think my thought here is that these 2 arrows could pull inside of the Galaxy and not waste as much fuel. And hopefully, like, all these bigger craft could extend farther, go longer. But I'm not 100% sure. I did this the other day, and this is honestly the second time, this is 2.5 times of me trying to do this. Anyways, let's go back to our Carrack. Now, the idea here is that you could have 1 mothership and multiple medical rescues going to help people, and if need be, they can bring them back to the Carrack, or they can settle it on the ground on location. I think it's a really cool idea and very minimalist. So the Carrack has a crew size of 6, and it has a tier 2 medical bed. So this is where things are going to get a little sticky. I don't know if the tier 2 medical bed will always be able to respawn. And it's important for our next ship, the 890 Jump, as well, because they both have tier 2 beds, or they both have a tier 2 bed. Right now, you can use them to respawn. I mean, obviously, there was that pirating drama with the guy respawning in his Carrack bed over and over and over again. I don't know if that's going to be a function going forward, but they will have a medical bed, a tier 2 medical bed. So, and next up, I kind of already hinted at it. The 890 Jump here, this little fleet, I have imagined as a luxury kind of service that's going to come in and wisp you away in the castle. They don't need heavy combat. They're not focused on combat, but they do, they can fight back. So you can't just, throw pot shots at the 890 and they'll be able to respond. So I threw in a couple 325As in here. Not really the best fighter, but it is capable. We also threw in 85X in for shuttling people around, for shuttling clients around, or people who need ride back to civilization again, or an Ursa rover that can become lowered from underneath to perform medical. And lastly, here we have the biggest medical ship that is concepted in the game currently, the Endeavor, and this is the Hope class Endeavor. It is a mobile hospital that's roughly the size of a football field and may get bigger before the game is actually finished. And the idea here is that you're going to occupy a spot in space. You have the ability to move, but getting this thing to move, probably not the easiest task. It has a front that detaches, and you could also just leave that back end anywhere in space and come back to it. So the idea here is to lock in an area of space and make a hospital. I mean, I don't know if this is in Pyro, Stanton, you choose. I mean, I think this is the Endeavor Hope class will really be valuable in a system like Pyro. With such a capable ship with respawn abilities and a hangar at the bottom here that you probably can't see very well, that will apparently have the ability to spawn shuttle-sized crafts. So I have no Pisces in this picture, but apparently you should be able to spawn a Pisces in the hangar. So anyone respawning can go on about their merry way. Don't know if that'll be true, but if it is, it's a nice option. That means all the small snub craft can be spawned in that hangar bay. Otherwise, I have built a fleet around securing the Endeavor. Could have went with the Hammerhead, right? Like, why not? Lots of guns. It doesn't move very fast, but it has a lot of firepower, and it's hard to approach. But The problem I see with the hammerhead and the size of the hammerhead is ships just using the Endeavor to stay out of the line of sight of the hammerhead as they pick apart the Endeavor. So I wanted to utilize a smaller ship here for security. So we went back to the Redeemer because it is a mean, heavy ship. And then we chose a Retaliator bomber class here. This ship can operate as a gunship and a missile boat for all the big ships that want to come and possibly throw stones at our Endeavor here. They would have to contend with the Redeemer and a Retaliator. For all the small craft and air security, I put 3 Gladius here. Again, you can choose whatever ship you have. You don't even have to have combat ships. Anything will do. Anything's better than nothing. As we've increased here, you can notice that the amount of manpower you need is going up as your capabilities go up. So I don't really see this being too viable, or you're going to see them too often. But I do think all the fleets I have shown you can be ran with like 30-ish people, maybe more, maybe less. Maybe you have AI blades or NPCs filling spots. But I don't think these are totally unviable. They're just not going to be like ubiquitous. They're not going to be everywhere, But otherwise, we have the E1 Spirit back here to transport anyone who cannot or doesn't have a craft they can call in the hangar here. And at this point, you're a hospital. People are going to rely on you. You want to offer them a higher end transport service. You're not just going to throw them in the back of the Cuddy Red, tell them to lay down on the medical bed, and wait for them to get back to civilization. The Cuddy Red there I have because it has 2 tier 3 medical beds, and I think it's a good option for everyone who doesn't need serious repair that happen in the field. If they need serious repair, they can come back to the Endeavor and get whatever medical services a hospital can offer. You can also get done here. But I could have also built this fleet out a lot more, and I really kind of want to. And if you liked this video and you want to discuss some more fleet options, I think I'm going to do a couple more videos where I discuss my personal fleet that I own with real money, or at least I dream fleet I would like to own with real money someday, and then a fantasy fleet for my org, MRRES, Medical Rescue Recovery Emergency Services, where we kind of are going to expand the purpose of a medical fleet out a little bit more. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. This was a shit show for me. I am not good at talking to a mic. I don't know how people do this. It's very awkward, but I hope someone got something out of it. If you did, hit the like button. If you didn't and you hate all of my opinions, go ahead and smash the dislike button. And you can subscribe or not. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to make content or I'm not, whether you subscribe or not. But anyways, if you have anything to add to the conversation today, please do so in the comments below. If you have any corrections, I got any stats wrong, I know for a fact I left a bunch out because I'm not going to sit here and ramble for 4 hours. But this is just to give some idea and to start the topic and start the conversation and what we actually think is viable. Personally, I see a lot of 2 or 3 ship fleets kind of being a medical, staple in the verse. Nothing too big, nothing too fancy, but I mean, obviously you can see things can get really fancy really quick and you need a lot of bodies to make it work. Anyways, citizens, I wish the best for all of you, and I'll catch you in the next one.